Well, good morning from the East Coast of the United States. I'm just going to give another few seconds to allow participants to join us by Zoom. And welcome to everybody as you all filter in. All right, let's get this started. Welcome to Investment Immigration Conversations. I'm your host, Carolyn Lee, founder of Carolyn Lee PLLC, a U.S. immigration law firm dedicated to clients building their futures with investment immigration. And this is the last installment of our summer CBI series. And I couldn't be more delighted to have with me my buddies, my friends, clients, and truly outstanding professionals in the investment immigration space, Ben Ricciuti and Ben Cummings and Bruce Ricciuti of Birch Capital. There are a lot of B's in there, folks, so you've got to cut me some slack. So I want to say a word about this event and a couple of words about Birch Capital, Ben and Bruce. So the E2 event here that we're hosting is informational. We're just going to introduce folks in our audience to ourselves, to Birch, to Bruce and Ben, and to myself and to our firm. Those of you guys who are listening in regularly don't need the latter part, but we're going to do it anyway. Secondly, to give you guys a deeper feel for Birch and Birch Capital, Ben and Bruce. So how do I know Birch Capital? I've known them as clients for probably about a decade. We've worked closely together in the EB5 space, putting together projects, and they're going to talk more about that. And these projects have been in Boston and in Baltimore, Maryland. And we both share, I think, the same philosophy about what we like to do, people we like to work with. And we pride ourselves in working with people we respect and enjoy being with. And this part's a little studied, so if I stumble, forgive me. I think there are people who talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. Then there are people who talk the talk and walk the walk. And then there are people who just walk the walk quietly, doing their thing and doing it excellently. And that's the category in which I would put Bruce and Ben and Birch Capital. So they're quiet, but they do their thing and they do it really beautifully. And so I'm going to use this space to kind of elevate their profiles a bit and introduce them to my little world and my audience. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Ben, who's going to tell us a little bit about Birch Capital and what you've got going on.
Thank you, Carolyn. We're going to quickly run through some slides for you to tell you a little bit about Birch Capital, about Bruce and myself, and our experience in U.S. real estate investing, both in the immigration context and perhaps some briefly in the larger context. As Carolyn mentioned, and you see on the screen now, we have to give you a quick disclosure to just tell you we're doing this as an informational session. We're not offering to sell anything to anybody or asking you to buy anything. And we're very thankful to Carolyn for hosting this graciously. And as she mentioned, she has been our immigration counsel for quite a few years and has become a good friend as well. Birch Capital is, as an overview, is a boutique firm. We're small. We generally work on one, maybe two projects at a time. Bruce and I are the principals in the firm, and we do have several other associates who work with us as needed. We also have outside securities counsel, corporate counsel, real estate counsel, and of course, Carolyn as our immigration counsel that we use as needed. Birch has invested in some select real estate projects throughout the country, both in the immigration investment area and conventionally. Bruce and I go back about 25 to 30 years working together, and collectively we've done quite a bit in the acquisition, the financing, the advisory, and also since 2010 in the EB-5 immigration world. Over those years, we've developed relationships nationally with financial institutions, real estate companies and developers, Fortune 500 companies, leading retail companies, and foreign investor groups as well. Bruce and I started working together close to 30 years ago. Bruce, if you want to just skip to the next slide, that's fine. I think Bruce's background is that he is president of an affiliated company called Birch REA, which is a commercial real estate advisory firm formed in 1990. His experience is with really all major property types in the country, and his firm specializes in advisory services and valuations to corporate real estate departments, to banking institutions, and primarily is focused on single tenant credit net lease real estate all across the country. Bruce and I met because my background is in real estate law, but I spent the better part of my career as vice president of real estate for two national retail firms. And that's where Bruce and I met when his company was retained to help us with valuation of properties that we were building for both a consumer electronics firm and then an automotive firm across the United States. So we go back quite a long way together. In 2010, we got involved in the EB-5 immigration space, and also since then have invested both together as partners, as Birch Capital, along with other friends, families, and institutions. And we've had experience in acquisition and investment that runs from residential apartment developments to medical offices, to urgent care facilities, which we own. We've done, primarily Bruce has done advisory work for companies such as Goldman Sachs and other large institutional investors, as well as retail banks and retail firms such as Rite Aid, CVS, Walgreens. He's also done advisory in oil and gas business, and I've done some project management in office building development. When we got into EB-5 funding, we've had three very special projects, and we'll take a few minutes. In a few minutes, we'll go through those for you. And then we also have done a little bit of alternative investing in a early stage venture capital firm, and in a rather speculative but interesting project in a gold mine out in California. You can do the next one, Bruce. So on EB5 and immigration in particular, we started in 2010. Our first project was for the University of Miami, Florida Life Science and Technology Park. It was a development that was sourced by Bruce in a prior relationship he had with the developer, a company called Wexford Science and Technology. We've had since then a second project in Boston, which was a development of a mixed use retail, residential apartment and condominium development. And then today we have an industrial project that's quite interesting, probably the most interesting project that Bruce and I have ever worked on together. And we'll use that in a little more detail as an example of both US real estate investment in general and the EB5 and E2 investment programs. Next slide, Bruce. So what we feel is a little different about Birch Capital, as I mentioned, we're a boutique term. We tend to only work on first-class projects with experienced developers and consultants that we know. Secondly, we provide transparency, full transparency to our investors through a Birch login portal, which provides all of the due diligence, all of the information about our investment projects and the finances of those, and is secure to all of our investors as well as our partners. In the EB5 space, we have 100% 526 approval. That's the conditional visa in EB5. And we also to date have 100% approval of all of the clients that we've worked with who have reached the stage of their permanent I-829 approvals as well. We're also very proud of the fact that we've returned EB5 investor capital to all of our investors in our first project, the University of Miami project, which started in 2011 and was repaid in 2016. And we've returned $4 million of capital in our second project, which is the Pierce Boston project, to those investors who have completed their conditional residency and are entitled to get their funds back. This slide is just a photo of the University of Miami Research and Development Building in the Life Science and Technology Park. It's located in the Miami Health District and is on property owned by the University of Miami. So the substantial portion of that building is leased to the University of Miami Medical School for research and development. That project cost $107 million to build. In 2016 or 17, it ultimately was sold for $220 million, which provided the funds to repay our EB5 loan. The next project that we went to from there was in Boston, Massachusetts, where we had one of our offices. It was developed by a very notable Boston developer who, again, we've had relationships with for over 20 years. It was a 30-story luxury mixed-use development with condominiums, apartments, and retail. The project cost was $293 million. We made an EB5 loan of $49.5 million. And the jobs that were created for EB5 purposes were more than twice the required jobs to get everybody their visas. This project was started in 2015 In 2018, the developer paid off our $49.5 million EB5 loan in 3 years, 2 years earlier than required. And as a result of that, we were able to start repaying money to some of our investors who had reached their conditional residency period. And we have redeployed those investors who have not yet been able to receive their funds into the next project, which Bruce is actually going to talk about in more detail, Trade Point Atlantic. So I will turn things over to Bruce for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Carolyn, for having us. This is a real exciting time to be able to talk about Birch Capital and our EB5, our investment experience, and our immigration investment experience. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you today about Trade Point Atlantic, which we are very, very excited about. This is probably our most impressive investment that we've ever been involved in. It is what I've been told is the largest private real estate development in the United States right now. That's predominantly in geographic size. Trade Point Atlantic is located in Baltimore, Maryland. It is a logistics and multimodal port development, meaning it has rail access, port access, and then vertical construction in the amount, when fully built out, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, 10 to 15 million square feet of space. And I believe there's maybe about 7-8 million square feet already have been constructed. This started in about 2015, 16. We got involved through another long-term relationship with a venture capital firm that is the primary investor, a group by the name of Redwood Development, which was also an investor in our Wexford project at the University of Miami. And these are two very successful Baltimore businessmen, Jim Davis and Steve Bisciotti, who control Redwood, and they control Trade Point Atlantic as well. So Trade Point really combines Ben and my expertise, mostly in the real estate field, as well as what we have predominantly been involved with in what we call net lease real estate. And Trade Point is a little bit different than a lot of other projects in the sense that most of the development is in the sense of build-to-suit development. So a building is not predominantly built until a lease is signed. So that's why we sort of consider this a credit tenant project. As you can see here on this slide, 3 of the main tenants at Trade Point Atlantic, they're already built and operational, are Amazon, Under Armour, and FedEx. And these buildings are quite large. They weren't built until a lease was signed. These are all long-term leases. So there's very little risk to investors with regard to operations. As you can see in this slide, Trade Point Atlantic is located in Baltimore, Maryland. The inset shows you the large size of the development in the blue inset circle. It's about 3,100 acres, about 1/3 the size of Manhattan. That gives you any idea of how large Trade Point Atlantic. And Trade Point Atlantic really is strategically based in the US. As you can see in the map of the US, it is the largest port on the East Coast. There's the furthest west, as you can sort of see. And Baltimore is one of the largest hubs for automobiles coming in into the country that serves, say, the top northeast quadrant of the United States. As we sort of said, there's a lot of different operations at Trade Point and a lot of different modes of revenue. There's a big marine and rail operations. There's 100 miles of rail track on the site. So basically rail lines are going in and out throughout, taking product from the marine and the port, taking it over to many of these distribution centers that are operated by our tenants. So we'll talk a little bit about some of our users. Amazon has 4 buildings and about 4 million square feet. I believe 1 building is under construction right now, and 3 of the buildings are operational. Another major tenant is Under Armour. This was the second largest tenant in the park, about over 1 million square feet. Under Armour is a very successful company that is actually based in Baltimore as well. So this is a little hometown Baltimore tenant. Most people know FedEx. FedEx was actually the first major tenant, built a transport facility on the site. This is what I really think is really fascinating. It gives you an idea of how large Trade Point is. As I indicated, you can sort of see in the picture on the right of the screen, you can see the harbor in the upper portion. And this is what's called a roll-on, roll-off. At one point, there was 100,000 Volkswagen cars on this site. That was a very large revenue stream. This is where Volkswagen also built a facility where cars can come in, they're conditioned, and then they're put on trucks, rail, and sent off to dealerships. We don't have a slide, but we're also really excited to announce that this is such a popular facility for the automotive industries that BMW has also signed a lease to operate a roll-on, roll-off facility at Trade Point. The Home Depot, another company I'm sure most people know, has 2 large distribution facilities on the site, and they both just opened recently. Floor & Decor is one of the largest specialty distributors of flooring and tile, wood, stone products in the United States. I believe they're based in Atlanta, and they have a large facility that opened within the last year at Trade Point. So here's some of the features of Trade Point that are a little bit different from a lot of other type of immigration transactions that you might see. This is a positive cash flow operation. There's no speculative development, or very little speculative development. We have long-term leases. I believe there's a couple tenants that have probably signed that we don't have in our deck here. McCormick Spices comes to mind, is building about 1 million square foot distribution center. I believe they're one of the largest retail spice companies. If you're in your supermarket and you go to the spice aisle, I think you'll see all the McCormick little, I think they're little red and white little box type. So you put your pepper in. Who else? We got Pomp.
You don't make all the dinners in your family?
I'm sorry?
You don't make all the dinners in your family, Bruce?
Since nobody cooks in my family, we don't have a lot of McCormick Spices.
But if you did, you would.
We would. We absolutely. I think we also have a large palm oil manufacturing company, Pompeii Oils, that's also signed a lease under tenants that we don't have here. And I think you'd be really surprised at what a big operation a palm oil plant is and how many different products palm oil goes into. This project for our fund is collateralized by the equity interests in this project, and as at a 3x multiple. It's a little complicated to explain here. We'd be happy to answer questions later on. But at our last calculation, based on the equity in the project and our existing loans, we have about a 300% equity cushion, about a 3x equity cushion in the project, meaning that we're extremely over collateralized, which is sort of the way Ben and I operate, very risk adverse. We want to basically make sure that our investors get their interest get their immigration status and get repaid. As I said, we have a strong revenue stream here. I think some of those new deals, Volkswagen, Home Depot, Florida Core, McCormick, BMW, sort of outline the project. I think that sort of sums up Trade Point. I don't know if I missed anything, Ben. I know it's sort of a quick overview.
No, I think you've got that. And if you'd like to, you want me to just pick up this last slide and then you can get
Sure.
back to Carolyn. So
Sure.
here's just some general, this last slide is really just some general questions that any investor should ask, particularly immigration investors. But as Bruce just mentioned, we are pretty risk adverse. And so if you're going to invest in US real estate, whether for conventional or immigration, these are some questions that you should ask is, you know, are your funds going to be escrowed until certain things happen? And as Bruce mentioned here, and with Trade Point, there's about 8 million square feet already constructed. So it's not like investing in something and then waiting it to see if it'll actually get built and financed and if you'll get paid back. This is already built and already positive cash flow. As Bruce mentioned, does the loan agreement provide you with more collateral than the amount of your loan? Does the developer have its equity in place? And if so, how much? And are there other institutions, big banks or lenders, who have also elected to finance this development? Are all the required permits and approvals in place for your development? And is the development team and the ownership of the property experienced and well financed? And then particularly in the immigration sense, you know, what does the sponsor of the immigration program have in terms of a record of repayment to the investors of their full capital, their interest? What is the project's visa approval rate? And then probably most importantly of all, do you have full transparency to all the project information? You get to see everything, including the financials, the development as it's ongoing. So those are our recommendations, both in the immigration side and as we mentioned, you know, EB5, we've had 11 years of experience now. We're also looking at E2 alongside the EB5 program for Trade Point Atlantic. And so if there are any questions, comments, we're happy to take that, and you're free to contact us at any time. We're happy to talk to all of you. So thank you very much for paying attention to us.
Assuming they were paying attention.
Yeah.
Let's give them the benefit of that doubt. And in any event, this video will be posted. Well, thank you so much, Bruce and Ben, for coming. It's kind of early for us, and that was really informative. I learned more than I ever knew about TPA and real estate investment generally, and also about your experience. You guys are pretty impressive. Happy to be hanging with you. Okay, so let's go to the more technical E2 visa informational aspect of our talk today. And keeping in mind that this is a part of our CBI and E2 summer series, this is going to be kind of geared toward delivering information about transitioning from citizenship by investment into an E2 US non-immigrant or temporary visa. So CBI plus E2 investment immigration solutions for 2021. And I do believe this is the year for us to be learning more about e-visas. So I'll talk a little bit more about myself and my experience in practice, and then we'll kick it into the E2 portion. But first, of course, being a lawyer, I have to give my disclaimer. This online seminar is only intended for general informational purposes. The seminar is not intended as and does not constitute either legal advice or a solicitation of any particular prospective client or anything. Moreover, attendance of this seminar does not constitute an attorney-client relationship with Carolyn Lee PLLC. As such, an attorney-client relationship may be formed only by specific and explicit signed engagement with an attorney from Carolyn Lee PLLC. That out of the way. So about myself. All right, so I just have to do this part. I am blushing underneath my foundation just a little bit. I've been very, very blessed in my professional career and buttressed by fantastic clients like Birch and mentors, and just being in the right place at the right time, really, with EB-5 and investment immigration. I've been in this space for a very long time, for over 15 years, and I've served in leadership roles in organizations like the American Immigration Lawyers Association, where I served as 4-term chair of the National EB-5 Committee. I currently serve as legislative counsel to Invest in USA, or IIUSA, drawing on my experience in EB-5 legislation dating back from about 2012. And I've been recognized in Best Lawyers and International Who's Who, and also 50 Outstanding Asian Americans in Business, which was particularly thrilling because it's not just lawyers. And in terms of experience on the ground, that's where the rubber meets the road, as folks say. My US project clients, including Birch, have raised over $2.5 billion in investment immigration capital alone. Of course, that gets stacked with other capital in many instances. These same US projects have cleared over $1.8 billion through the last stages of the immigration process, meaning those investors have cleared their I-829 petition approvals, completing that long cycle of the EB-5 investment progress. I've advised and prepared thousands of investor immigration filings, and I am considered an industry leader and advocate, very interested in how we can optimize this incredible asset that our nation has to bring together investment and immigration and help our projects and economy. So about the E2 visa, why the E2 visa? So many reasons. I'll just hit on a few. There's no quota. We don't have a quota of any kind in this space, and there's no backlog as a result. It's quick, relatively. Nothing is quick in US immigration, but it's quick relatively. It's typically months and not years, as is the case with the green card side of many green card immigration filings. It's one step, not two or three. The application is made at the US consulate and then you're done. Whereas a lot of other immigration processes involve at least two, and if not three, as in our beloved EB-5. 5-year visas are issued in most instances. This is the stamp that the investors get in their passports, allowing them to travel into the United States. It's valid for 5 years in most instances. It depends on the reciprocity, the arrangement that we have with our partner countries around the world. It's based on the duration of the visa that US citizens are accorded when traveling to those other countries. Low investment threshold, again, relatively. The point here is that it's not a set amount, whether it's 900,000 or 500,000, as is required in the EB-5 setting. It depends on the nature of the business. It's relative, and therefore, in most instances, can be modulated. It's down. It's usually lower than the EB-5 threshold. There's no maximum duration. Some of you may know that in our other non-immigrant visa categories like the H or L, there is a max of 7 years, let's say, 6 years in the H-1B context. Those are renewable in certain instances, but there is a max. In the E2 context, there isn't. As long as the underlying investment exists, it can be evergreen. There's no need for an unabandoned foreign residence, though. Some non-immigrant categories require that unabandoned home abroad to which you have to demonstrate a desire and intention to return to. We don't have that in the E2 context. For those of you in the know, it's not technically a dual intent visa, but it is a hybrid of a sort, practically speaking. Why E2 visa for backlogged investors? So I'm talking about the EB5 backlog in particular with this graphic, but there are other employment-based backlogs as well, as we know, in the EB2 and EB3 categories, not just EB5. But this graphic relates to the backlog in the EB5 setting. And this was in a presentation by State Department officials recently. And there are a number of provisos here. These are conservative estimates, and those disclaimers and provisos are on my next slide. But this is presented by the Department of State, and we see that there's a 17.2-year wait potentially for EB5 investors who are China mainland born. And there's a 7-year wait for Vietnamese investors. We don't have treaties with either of these countries, which I'll go into in a moment. But the point is, this is a very, very, very long wait. And if you're an investor who has the means and are not terribly excited about this wait, the CBI to E2 solution is there. So why E2 for those investors? And this is the disclaimer and qualifications that attach to that graphic that I just showed you. Why E2 visa for all investors? Again, this goes to the investment threshold. We've seen in the EB5 space, when the investment threshold jumped from 500,000 to 900,000 in 2019, it didn't exclude everybody, right? It wasn't a complete shutdown, but as you can imagine, it excludes a lot of the families worldwide. They're just priced out of it. They can't afford an investment at the $900,000 level. The E2 is more flexible, so it's more open to those families, to all families. And of course, while we're here, we must also talk about the fact that we have uncertainty in the investment threshold level in the EB5 space, and that's resulting from this litigation that is playing out as we speak. And just very, very briefly, because this presentation is not about this, but we did have a change in regulations in 2019, as I mentioned, that brought the investment threshold up to 900,000. And there's been litigation challenging that. And as a result, we're now back to 500,000. But that disposition, that order on litigation has been appealed. That just happened this week, a couple of days ago. So the fate of where we're actually going to land in terms of those regulations and the investment thresholds is a bit uncertain at the moment. Why E2 visas for all investors? Well, for those investors who were ready, willing, and able to go through the EB5 process, most of those investors do come through the regional center program. And our regional center program lapsed in June 30 of this year, 2021. It will come back. I am confident of that. But as of this moment, it is in a lapse. So for investors who are ready to move, that option is currently not on the table, but the E2 is a permanent part of our immigration landscape, so it is here. Why E2 visa for all investors? Wow, one really can go on, but I think this is my last slide on this. If you are already an EB5 investor and you are looking for a way to wait out the backlog, come to the United States, establish a base, have your children attend school, then the E2 is certainly something that that family should consider. New investor, avoid the EB5 backlog. Very difficult to plan your life when you know that you've got to wait a dozen or so years before you can land. The threat of the EB5 backlog, the threat of sunset, and the other uncertainties in our EB5 program that we're all trying to navigate. Don't have that with the E2. Can convert to a green card in certain situations that requires planning at the outset, which of course we engage in for clients interested in that route. Some aren't, but some are. E2 visa requirements. So what do you need? First of all, you need a treaty. We need a treaty between the United States and the country that the investor is from, or the country with whom the investor holds a passport. So the individual investor must have treaty nationality. And examples there, this is posted on the State Department website. We have 80 plus treaties. They include Canada, UK, Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, Egypt, Turkey, Grenada. We do not have a treaty with India, China, Nigeria, and Vietnam. And of course, these are among the countries that are that have nationals most able and interested in investment immigration. Citizenship by investment solutions. So this is where CBI would come in. And indeed, CBI is one of the most dynamic industries in immigration, certainly, and perhaps across the board, more generally speaking. It's very alive, it's very active, it's very exciting. Very happy to have discovered this. And I do believe that COVID has energized the interest and demand for global mobility, of which citizenship by investment is a part. It is a way for investors with means to be able to have a way to acquire nationality that allows for more visa-free travel, that allows for US immigration. So very interesting and very dynamic field at the moment. And so the way this would work, of course, is if you are from one of these countries that is not a treaty country, you could still get an E2, very much a tested path by acquiring E2 treaty nationality through citizenship by investment programs existing, and they are proliferating in countries like Grenada, very well established, and Turkey as well, other countries. And you acquire that citizenship by investment, then you apply for the E2 visa because now you have treaty nationality. More into the nuts and bolts of the requirements, the investor has to make a substantial investment. You do have to make a substantial investment, but it's not a set amount. It's relative to the kind of investment. So if you are investing in a manufacturing facility, for example, well, the substantiality threshold is going to require that investor to probably invest millions, depending on how that manufacturing facility is capitalized, the costs, or the cost of acquisition. Other businesses, tech startups, app development companies that would require a certain level of preparation, but you don't need a lot to get that business going. You need a machine and a desk. So that in that instance, the substantiality threshold is much, much lower by virtue of the nature of that kind of business. The investor must develop and direct the E2 company. So the investor can't be entirely passive, just like in the EB5 setting. And the investor must own at least 50% of the E2 company because the company also has to have the required treaty nationality. The E2 company doesn't have job requirements per se, like we do in the EB5 context, but it has to be real and operating. It has to be in business, and the E2 company has to generate income. It has to be a commercial undertaking, and it has to be having some real economic impact in the United States. So this is one of the points I mentioned, what makes the E2 so attractive. And it's how quick it is relatively, or I should really say how quick it can be, because COVID has thrown this timeline really very much out of whack because of the consular closures. So it is subject to COVID variables, other factors. So this is really illustrative. It's really designed to show you that it can move quickly. So let's say June 2021, you apply for Grenada CBI. October 2021, they are very efficient with this, Grenada, for example. You might have a Grenada passport. And then really right away, you could apply for the E2 visa. And then under normal circumstances, you may be granted an interview for that E2 visa in May, and then be approved for that visa a few weeks later, and then enter the United States. So this process could be about a year under normal circumstances, but it's not. We we don't have those normal circumstances now. So got to talk about how that time frame is actually going to play out now. Options for college graduates. I'll touch on this because I think this is really exciting. And again, it's not this sort of broad spectrum. It's for everybody, but it is for some folks, and it can be a very neat solution for some folks. So I'm going to touch on this F1 OPT to E2 for students transitioning into a work visa in the United States. Again, this is illustrative. Okay, so this is kind of how it might go, or it could go. So pre-graduation, the students would be gearing up and applying and getting their H-1B ducks in order. But let's say you're rejected in the H-1B lottery. You could still apply for CBI and the E2. And based on the time frame that we just discussed, it is possible, particularly pre-COVID, post-COVID, to obtain that E2 visa before your 12-month OPT expires. But those students also have 60 days post-OPT, so you do have a little wiggle room at the end also. Again, just illustrative. This is a fun timeline. I actually love this. And kudos to Tom in my office who's created this beautiful graphic. This shows you that if it's a student, if you're a student in F1 and you have STEM OPT, you're in the science, technology, engineering, math field, then you've got, whoa, an extra 24 months of STEM OPT, during which time, sure, you get multiple bites at that H-1B apple, but you could also be developing your E2 entrepreneurial startup plan. And that's where that's where it would be exciting, where we could engage with that entrepreneur to talk about this, how this solution might work in their landscape of possibilities for work visas after graduation. So E2 flow. This is my firm's comprehensive and proprietary client service when it comes to E2 visas. So what do we mean by the E2 flow? What we mean is that it's a process that we've designed, that we continue to work on. It's a technology, and it's really based on understanding. That is really what's driving E2 flow. Is I'm an immigrant. I get it. We get it. It's hard. And in the investment immigration space, it's an investment as well. It's not just an investment of funds, of treasure. It's an investment of your time. It's an investment of your hopes and dreams. We get that. And so our goal is to make this process as seamless as we possibly can, as easy as we possibly can, because we understand this voyage. So, and we break our services down into traditional E2 businesses that the client might be interested in versus a hybrid E2 business. Traditional E2 business, we're really talking about the traditional workhorse E2 visa. It's just been around forever, where the E2 investor purchases or starts up an E2 concern. There's going to be active business involvement. They're going to be in there at 4 in the morning till 4 in the morning the next day. And so it's really for entrepreneurs. The hybrid E2 business is really where we've been focusing a lot of our energies. This is where the investor is investing in an E2 company. They are developing and directing. We must meet that requirement, but not actively engaged in that business on a day-to-day basis. And that is not a requirement. So the hybrid E2 business is really for investors, rather than entrepreneurs, really. And so our E2 flow service is the same across both. So you're going to see the same bullet points on both columns because it's comprehensive. It is, we're going to handle each of the application elements for the client, but it's going to be different because in the traditional context, the client is going to be acquiring a new business often or starting up a new business that they intend to operate. So it often requires quite a lot of more conversation in the beginning and along the way, which we're excited to do and we're happy to do. And the hybrid is going to be more, this is more where Birch would be. And this is more about an investment E2 vehicle that isn't structured that way, isn't hands-on day-to-day. So now we're going to take questions, and we already have a bunch of questions in our chat. So wonderful. And I'm going to, let's take some of those questions. All right. Does this include E2? Yes. And I think that was a question for Ben and Birch. And we will include an email for Bruce and Ben in our post-event email that goes out. So yes, and it's, can we just put it in the chat? Can we do that? Bruce or Ben, can you guys put your emails in the chat for folks?
Sure.
Can we, these are questions for Ben and Bruce. Hi, can we see the capital stack of the trade park project, please? Yep, I'm sure they would be happy to share that with you. Ben Cummings. Yeah, so we cannot show that information on a public webinar, but of course, can discuss that more one-on-one. We cannot, yep. Yep. The hybrid approach is definitely interesting. Agreed. Demand for that. Great informative presentation. Thank you. What if one company is already incorporated? Yep. Yes. So some clients have this, they've got a number of vehicles already formed in the United States. And yes, we can use one. The first thing we've got to look at is how the ownership is structured. If you are a treaty national and you own 100% of it, then that vehicle could qualify. So yeah, we would look at it. Yeah, we don't have to form. I think the question is, do you have to form a brand new entity? And no, you do not. Great. There's information for Bruce. It's Bruce, B-R-U-C-E, at Birch Capital, BIRCHCAPITAL.com. And the number is there as well. And Ben is Ben, B-E-N, at birchcapital.com. Thank you very much. With an E2 investment with TradePoint, could this be rolled into an EB5 investment? If the regional center program. Let's discuss. We wanted this to be general and informational and super high level. But of course, we want to have conversations with folks to answer your specific questions. So please do reach out to Ben and Bruce or to me. And yes, this will be recorded and posted. Wonderful. Great. Ben and Bruce, did you have any questions or comments or any thoughts you want to close us out with? We're nearing the top of the hour.
No, I think between your presentation and ours, we pretty well covered what we've all been doing together. And as we've mentioned, we're happy to talk to everybody individually about their situation with the TradePoint Atlantic project, more about Birch Capital, and certainly more about EB5 or E2. So thank you for providing the opportunity.
Such a pleasure. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. This was a real pleasure. Look forward to hearing from everybody. Get a chance to make some new friends.
Yes, yes. Well, new friends and old. Thank you so much for listening and joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Bruce.